Vayigash. I think maybe touch on something. We have this coming Tuesday is Asar B'Tevis. It's a fast day. Just a broader question that I heard from my own Shiva, Yochanan Zweig Shlita. Why is it that we fast? What's the idea, It's not like as Jews we don't have enough distress in the world. Well, let's add another couple of days that we're going to have more distress. I mean, what's the purpose? What are we trying to accomplish?
Get rid of the Sukkariot, no?
I hear you. What's the idea? I mean, we're not into self-flagellation. We don't believe in that per se. I mean, so let's afflict ourselves. Let's not eat. I mean, we have 4 major fasts during the year, and that's the way. We fast. What we're trying to accomplish with a fast. Thank you. Let's see if we can touch on that a little bit. But I want to deal with something here which at the core, I believe there are very few families that don't suffer from this problem. And the fact that we're seeing it by the Gedola Olam, we're seeing it by the greatest Jews in history, by Yaakov and Yosef. We have to understand it because we're talking people that understood human psychology, that understood human nature. I'd like to try and answer the following difficulty. The Talmud makes the following statement. The Talmud says that the effects of Yaakov Avinu giving Yosef his Ksonas Pasim, it's multicolored. I think it's not multicolored, but it was the additional raiment, the additional cloak that he wore, his regal cloak. The effects of it resulted in the Jews having to go down to Egypt. It's a very strong statement, right? Because that fostered the jealousy, resulted in the sale, and resulted in the Jews having to go down to Egypt. That's what the Talmud says. Obviously, the Talmud is saying, and the Talmud makes a statement, from here we learn that a parent should not favor one child over the other. In the sense of what was Yaakov thinking? Yaakov Avinu, we're talking out of the 3 Avos, he's the one that's shalem, he's the one that's complete. He doesn't understand you're creating problems by favoring one child over the other. As I said, and I think that's a problem on some level and some time, and every family has that same problem. Our treating one child different than treating the other creates a jealousy and creates problems. And as I said, and Yaakov Avinu is taken to task. I mean, the bigger problem is not really me raising the problem. The Talmud itself raises this problem. Right, what we have over here is that the brothers bring Binyamin to Yosef. And Yosef reveals himself at this point to the brothers. And Pasuk says, "Vayiten lahem Yosef Hagalos." He gave them the wagons and he gave them Tzed Laderech, and he gave them provisions for the way. They're going back now to bring Yaakov. And then the pasuk says, L'chulam nasan le'ish chalifa smalos. All of the brothers he gave changes of clothing. L'binyamin nasan shlosh me'os kesef v'chamesh chalifa smalos. Binyamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothing. So, the Gemara in Megillah says, how could Yosef do that? He himself has been the subject of what happens when favoritism is shown from one brother over the other, to the point that he ends up getting sold and thrown into jail. He's had many years to contemplate the effects of what happened. First thing he does when he's reunited with the brothers, what does he do? He goes and favors Benjamin over the other brothers. It's not my question. Talmud asks that question. The Talmud says that Yosef's gifts were there they were alluding to that from Binyamin there's going to be a descendant whose name is Mordechai, and Mordechai is going to be rewarded and represent Achashverosh, and the pasuk says, and he's going to be Lavush Malchus, and goes through the 5 different types of garments that he would wear at the story of Esther. So somehow, therefore, by giving to Binyamin, who is the patriarch of the family, it's alluding to the fact that from him is going to come Mordechai, who's going to lead the Jewish people, save the Jewish people with Esther, and he's going to be the counselor to the king Achashverosh, and he's going to wear the 5 garments. What does that mean even? How does that even answer the question? The question is, you're showing one brother favoritism over the other. No, it's okay, you know what? Because from him is going to come... How's that an answer? How does that answer the problem? The problem is you're favoring one brother over the others. We said favoring brothers creates a problem. Yosef is the poster boy for that. And now he goes and does the same thing because of something somehow, even if you say somehow, this puts into play, right? Ma'aseh avot simanu banim means what the fathers do have an impact on the children. Somehow him wearing the 5 clothing will strengthen the ability. Mordechai can wear the 5, but still, why is Yosef not sensitive? And that was the premise of the question. Why is he not sensitive, right? You could say maybe it's a difference if it's a father or if it's a brother, but the Talmud doesn't go with that. The Talmud says it's a problem. It has to come up with an answer to the question. You're favoring one brother over the other brothers. Why does that not evoke jealousy? Why doesn't it evoke the negative feelings that Yosef himself was subject to? One last question over here. We have a tremendously emotional meeting between Binyamin and Yosef. They're both from the same mother, right? Rivka only had 2 children. Rachel only had 2 children. Rachel had 2 children. She had Yosef and Binyamin. And they've been separated now. Going on 12 years, maybe more. So the pasuk says like this: Vayipol al Savrei Binyamin Achiv Vayefk. Yosef fell on the on the neck of Binyamin, actually the neck, and he wept. Uvinyamin bacha al tzavarav, and Binyamin cried on his neck. And then he kissed all the other brothers, and they all cried together. He cried with right. So Rashi says, what is this? He fell on Savrei Binyamin. So I guess Rashi's bothered by the word tzavar is a neck. Savrei is plural. I mean, he fell on his necks. It's not referring to like a double chin or something. It's a plural. What does it mean he fell on his neck in the plural? So Rashi says something interesting. He says, and this again, Rashi is saying pshat. Rashi's trying to understand the pshat in the pasuk. At that moment, they both had Ruach HaKodesh. They both were able to see something that's going to happen in the future. Binyamin, he shares the property that is beneath the Beis HaMikdash, the Temple Mount, in where they were divided up. So the Beis HaMikdash was going to be built on Binyamin's property. So it says that Yosef cried for the two Batei Mikdash that were going to be destroyed in the portion of Binyamin. And Binyamin cried on his, that says in the singular, Tzavarav, that for 369 years before the Beis HaMikdash was built, in Shiloh there would be a Mishkan. Mishkan was a tabernacle, and that was going to be built in the territory of Yosef, and that also would eventually end up being destroyed. So Binyamin is crying for the Mishkan Shiloh that's in the territory of Yosef, and Yosef is crying for the two Batei Mikdash that are destroyed in. What's going on here? That's like they haven't met each other, and that's what each one's thinking about. The other one's Batei Mikdash, and each one's crying. What's pshat over here? This is like Rashi is bringing down as pshat. This is the introduction over here to the reconciliation between the brothers. So let's just review again the questions. We said that just to understand we have a fast day coming up, just the idea of why are we depriving ourselves on a fast day? That's the way we commemorate tragedies, we fast. We don't have enough things to distress, and we should be feeling more distress. Why is that? What's the message of a fasting on a fast day? We need to feel pain. We need to... Trying to understand, first of all, how Yaakov could make the mistake of favoring Yosef. It seems to be parenting 101. You don't want to create jealousy. So don't favor one child over the other. Yaakov goes ahead and does it, and the Gemara says that that's caused the Jews to go down to Egypt because of that mistake. What was he thinking? And then Yosef, and they finally get back together, and all the suffering he's had because of that favoritism. First thing he does is he favors Binyamin. Right? And the Talmud says, because of what's going to happen later on with Mordechai. How does that justify it? The first thing that each one is thinking about is he's worried about his Batei Mikdash, he's worried about his Mishkan. Why is that? That's the introduction to the reconciliation. It's interesting why that would be. So I said, this is something that is very, very common. We find this especially problematic. You find this in Yerushas, in wills. Right? Families that never talk again, you know. He left him this, and he left me this, and why did you get this, and why did he get that, and it was very interesting. I didn't think about it, but right now I think about it. It's also, you know, it's almost built in, creating the problem, because the Torah says that the firstborn gets double. You're almost creating the problem by saying, okay, the firstborn gets double. I guess you could argue because he's the Torah is mandating the first kids will double. You can't be jealous about something that the Torah itself is mandating. But what taka is the pshat? You know, let's say you have a situation where you have father builds up a family business, wants his kids to take over the business. Right? Happens to be one of them has more of a business acumen. One of them is brighter. One of them can be the CEO, where the other ones can't. Right? So it doesn't make sense to say over there, oh, you know, everyone, you have to deal with them all equally. Everybody equally. You're going to destroy the business. So how do you create a situation where you're not going to create jealousy by favoriting somebody, but you need to favor that one because that's the one that can take care of it. Why do you make him in charge? Because he can be in charge. He knows what he's doing. So the answer is, obviously, we don't say destroy the business and do things equally. Right? There's certain times that you have to choose the one that's going to be in charge, the one that knows what he's doing. But the pshat has to be, the only way it works is if the one that you choose understands, and also in terms of his own mission, that it's not going to be about taking care of myself. The way I'm going to do it is that it's going to be clear to my brothers that this is good for them too. This is good for all of us. Me doing it will make it that they will gain by it. If there is that clear understanding that my being put in this position is not for my agenda. My being put in this position is it's for our agenda, then that will offset any problem of jealousy. Because it's for me. I'm going to be benefiting. If I was running the business, I'm going to make more money by him running the business than if I'm running the business. Meaning that the way, you should there should be parity, equal, deal with everybody equal. But when it makes more sense to deal with one different than the other, you got to deal with that one differently. But it has to be done in a way that the other brothers are recognizing, the other family members are recognizing that this is for them. They're going to be gaining from it. If they understand they're going to be gaining, there won't be jealousy. Because it's not something for him, it's not for his agenda or my agenda, it's for all our agenda, it's for them. Then there won't be jealousy. Right. Clearly, Yaakov Avinu saw in Yosef, he had the qualities that he could be a leader. He had that leadership, and he knew that was necessary for the Jewish people. Even though Yehuda is the king, but there are leaders, there are qualities within Yosef that had to be developed. As we see, Yosef saves his brothers. His famine, he brings his brothers to Mitzrayim. He saves their lives. His leadership is what saves their lives. Yaakov saw that. So what was the problem? The problem is that the way Yosef dealt with it, he didn't give over the message to the brothers that this is for your agenda. You know, fixing his hair, looking sharp. I mean, the message they were getting is, it's all about him. It's not about us. So that's why. So I'm saying, just trying to understand where the mistake with Yaakov was. The mistake wasn't that he was developing or favoring Yosef in a certain way, that itself wasn't in itself the problem. The problem is that the way the message was getting to the rest of the brothers that evoked the jealousy, that it wasn't for their benefit. Not for their benefit, then there's going to be a problem. Right? So now, assuming that was the mistake of Yaakov, now we can understand why Yosef's not making that mistake. Because whatever effects, right, transcendental type of effects that Yosef, by giving Binyamin these garments, are going to have, that Mordechai is now going to be able to stand in front of Achashverosh with the 5 regal raiments, but that's for everyone. The other brothers are benefiting from that too. They're all being saved by Mordechai. Since they're all being saved by Mordechai, and that's the message that it's being done because in the future this act is going to help us all benefit, then it doesn't evoke the jealous. That's what the Talmud is answering. Yes, it would be a problem, you're favoring one or the other, but you know why it's not a problem? Because this act allows the descendant of Binyamin to have that to have the effect that all the brothers, the whole Klal Yisrael, the whole Jewish people are going to be saved in the times of Purim. That does not create the jealousy. Now the question is, that only works if it's Binyamin and Mordechai, it's going to Binyamin through to Mordechai, are not focused on their own agenda. But they're focused on the agenda of others. They're focused on the others, they're not on their own. So where do we see that Mordechai and Binyamin have that outlook? So Mordechai, clearly, he goes to Esther and he says that you need to step up, you need to do something here to help. And he says that, Al tadami benafshech, don't think that if you keep quiet, so then, you're going to be saved. God is going to figure out a different way to save everybody else. Don't think about yourself over here. Your focus needs to be on the whole Jewish people. Mordechai has that message. That Mordechai has that in him. Where do we see it in Binyamin? It's very interesting. Most people, right? You get up in age, so you meet people. I got a backache. Yeah, I also have the same kind of backache. I got a leg ache. You have, everyone is feeling what they feel, and that evokes in the other person the feelings that they feel about themselves. Right? That's not empathy, right? Empathy is not if you say you got a backache and I also have a backache. That's not empathy. Empathy is, you know what empathy is? Empathy is if I have a backache and you come and say your back hurts, I feel for you. I know how you feel. You know how I know you feel? I know what it is like to have a backache. That's empathy. Empathy means I feel for you. I know how you feel. Very interesting. Yosef has this vision that we're going to have 2 Beis HaMikdashes are going to be destroyed, and his Mishkan and his property is going to be destroyed. Binyamin has that same vision. There's 2 ways you could deal with it. Each one could cry because of the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan in their own property. You know what each one cries over? Each one is crying about what's happening in the other person's property. That's empathy. Empathy is, I'm not crying for my loss. I'm crying for your loss. When I can cry for your loss, that shows that I care about not my own agenda. I care about what's going on with others. The reason that precedes Yosef giving the gifts, because that's saying, that's Binyamin. Binyamin is not thinking about what's going on for him. Binyamin is thinking about the loss of others. In fact, we see that the 10 sons of Binyamin, each one was named over the loss of Yosef. His 10 sons, each one was named after. But that's why it introduces, because it's showing Yosef is saying Binyamin is developing, I'm developing in him some qualities that's going to result in his great-great-great-great-grandson being a leader, because he has that empathetical quality, that quality of empathy that is needed when you develop someone who's going to be taking responsibility for the rest of us. And he's got it. That's the introduction, with each one crying for the other one's loss. There's a so I think that answers up, meaning the question, what we're pointing out, we're saying is that, yes, you cannot favor one child over the other. But if the family needs that the one child is favored so that it helps all the family, then it's okay. But the important ingredient is, the perception is that that person's agenda is not going to be himself. That person's agenda is going to be everybody else's. Then you can do it without there being any problems. There is a Rashi in Maseches Brachos, the Gemara in Daf Vav talks about what is the igra, the reward of a fast day. What is the reward of a fast day? It's not that you lose 2 pounds. Right? What is the reward that a person receives on a fast day? So it says that the reward that is garnished on a fast day is through the charity that one gives. That's what it says. Very interesting thing. You're supposed to give charity on a fast day. Comes along Rashi. Now Rashi is the commentary explaining the Gemara. So what does Rashi say? When you give charity on the night after the fast ends. Means if today was a fast day, at the end, by Ma'ariv tonight, when you give charity, that's when you get the reward of a fast day. That's not the Talmud says. The Talmud says, what's the reward of fast? Giving charity. Comes along Rashi and he says, you know what? When should you give charity? When the fast ends. What's Rashi trying to say? Where does he get that from? It's an unbelievable message he's saying. What is the number one thing when you daven Ma'ariv, right? When you finish the fast day, what's the number one thing on everyone's mind? What do they want to do? You want to go and eat. He says, now you know what it feels to be a poor person. Now you go give the charity. When you can give it with empathy, that's what Rashi said. That's the charity is that the idea is that you can empathize. We can't usually. How do we know? We know what it means to be hungry. We don't know what it means to be hungry. So how do you give with empathy for somebody that's hungry? On the night after the fast day, that's how you know that's when you can feel what it means like. That's when you go ahead and give. That's when you're doing something with empathy. That's when you go ahead and do it. That's what Rashi's telling you. That's how you do it. Which is giving us a whole different insight into what it means to fast. The idea of fasting is not because we need to afflict the self-flagellation. Let's afflict ourselves more than we have to. The idea of fasting is that there is an importance that we go through life being able to empathize and feel the needs of others. What the message of a fast is that maybe we've gone our day-to-day lives, we don't have that empathy. We don't feel what others need. When you fast, the feeling you should have is, I'm only fasting one day, look how I feel. What about those people that have nothing to eat every single day? It's to evoke empathy. That is the message of why we fast. And then the question is, what do we do about it? To create that sense, that hones that sensitivity of empathy. So we're saying here, and that the Parsha actually is developing it, that's really leadership. Leadership is, the Rambam calls a king, he's the lave of the entire people. Lave Kol Yisrael. The king is the heart of the Jewish people. The idea of kingship, the idea of being a king, is that I'm not just carrying my burden. I feel what everybody else needs. I'm thinking outside of myself. Leadership is the ability not to just follow your agenda, but it's to see what everybody else needs and see it from their perspectives and their needs. Have that empathy that's necessary to understand what they're going through. Developing that. We all need to, it's that Steve McCovey wrote, "The Leader in Me." But everybody needs to have a sense of leadership. It means everybody has to have that sense of, I'm responsible not just for what I need, I'm responsible for what others need as well. And it's interesting, that's the fast that Chazal are telling us, that we fast because to develop that. And I think that's for ourselves, for our children, developing empathy it's a very difficult thing to do. That is the number one element in terms of leadership. And if we say, when we memorializing the destruction of the temples and all the destructions of that come from a breakdown in human relationships, the one thing we're trying to hone and develop is empathy. So it seems to be that being empathetic goes a long way to fixing broken relationships as well. Yes, we know that. In all these self-help books, it means being self-reflective is the first thing. We have a society that really is against being self-reflective. Almost everything you look at, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, even video games, everything is to stop people from being self-reflective. Right? Because most people don't like what they see when they start being self-reflective. Right? But self-reflective does not mean just focusing on myself. It means focusing on others and being reflective in a way that have that sensitivity that I should be able to feel what others feel and building empathy. So I think that's the message here with Yosef, why the first thing is each one is crying for the other one's loss. It's unbelievable. You have two people, it's like two Holocaust survivors. Everyone's family's been lost. Each one, they meet each other. Each one's crying for the other one's loss. It's an unbelievable thing. That's a sensitivity. Crying for what somebody else has lost, even though they have the same thing. The Chazal tell us that if a person has a sickness, right, we learn it from Avraham Avinu. He prays for Avimelech. Avimelech can't have children. He's been punished. He prays for him. What's the result? His wife gets pregnant. He needs to pray for himself too. But when you're sensitive to what somebody else and you ask for what somebody else needs, then God responds to you too. For the same need. So you're concerned about somebody else's sickness. If that's by you, then it'll help. The flip side to that, and I'll finish with this, I heard from my Rosh Hashiva once, the most scariest thing. It shocked me. I mean, my Rosh Hashiva in general is a very, very sensitive person. I used to learn with him a lot. And I used to sit there, and people used to come and talk to him on the phone about their problems and their issues. And I used to see the anguish on his face. I used to see, when he used to hear what they said, like how troubled and bothered by. And I asked him once, it's hard to go through life that every time you hear somebody else's troubles and problems, you internalize them, And he said to me something which is he said it off the cuff, he said, I found that in life, when I don't feel empathetic to other people, what happens to them, then the same thing happens in my family. You have to be on a level for that, but so we're saying the opposite. We're saying is if you start feeling for others, then God will help take care of, He's saying that some people at a certain level, if you don't feel what others feel, we're not dealing with part 2 of that. Let's just deal with part 1. But part 1 is having that empathy and that sensitivity, then God will take care of the needs that we have as well.